What is up, guys? Rumble Rants here, back with another one. In today's video, I'm going to be breaking down why I believe Islam moving up in weight is the bad move and why I think he is ducking Ilia Topuria. So this is something new. I don't really give a lot of opinions. It's more of like a journalistic side of view of things. But for today, I figured I'd change it up a bit, give you my opinions on why I think it's the wrong move for him. Before we jump in, make sure you watch the UFC Vegas 106 breakdowns I posted yesterday. I'm filming both tonight. This one should come out after the fact, so make sure you watch that. Let me know your thoughts and takeaways from this video as well. And make sure you're following me on X. That's been one plug. X, Instagram. I'm going to have all my MMA bets, pro wrestling, MMA bets, content, opinions, banter, grapple, gimmicks, and gambles. Everything here with Rumble Rants. So to start today's video, I want to talk about how at UFC 317 next month, we were supposed to have the best fight the UFC could possibly make. We would have had undefeated Ilia Topuria taking on the pound for pound number one in Islam Makhachev, what I think would probably be the biggest fight we've had since, I don't know, maybe Conor Khabib. Like, that's how big this fight could have been. But after last month, when Belal Muhammad lost the belt to Jack Della Maddalena, Islam said he's committed to moving up in weight to 170 and wants to contend for that title. He feels like it's best for his legacy. And generally, when people fight in mixed martial arts, it's about one of four things that I've broken it down into. Of course, everyone has their own motives and motivations, but these are the four things I want to dive into for today's videos: the competition side of things, legacy, money, and fame. So I'm going to touch on these four reasons why I think this is a bad move for Islam, and also why I think the move only makes sense if he's ducking Ilia Topuria. So now at International Fight Week on June 28th, we have Ilia Topuria taking on Charles Oliveira. Don't get me wrong, super exciting fight there, but nowhere near the fight we could have had with Islam versus Topuria. So before we get started, I do want to talk about the positive things of Islam. He's 27-1, guys. He's the number one pound-for-pound fighter in the world. I think he's one of the best fighters of all time. But to me, if we're talking about legacy, which is what he seems this whole thing's about for him, his title reign's been sloppy at best. If you look at his recent fights, to get the number one contender fight, he beat Bobby Green, who at that point's already old, no real takedown defense, beat him easily, became number one contender. And let's be honest, it probably was deserved, but he doesn't have any key wins to get his title fight. Then his title fight, he beats Charles Oliveira. Big win. Nothing but respect for that win. Then he takes on Volkanovski twice. First fight's a very close decision down in Australia. Second fight, he beats him quickly in round one. No disrespect to Volk. I think he's also one of the legends of the sport. But at the same time, Volkanovski is not even in Islam's weight class. He's a 145er. He is small for 155. Islam's substantially bigger, and with Islam being primarily a wrestler, this matchup didn't make much sense to begin with. And at the time, both divisions were kind of slower, so I didn't hate it. But at the same time, for Islam's legacy now, it doesn't look great. And since then, he's beaten Dustin Poirier and Renato Moicano. Poirier, he's another legend, but let's be honest, at this point in his career, he's not a credible title challenger. In Moicano, he stepped in on short notice, replacing Arman Tazrukian. Islam was like minus 1,200 in that fight. I don't know if the odds are on here or not, but yeah, minus 950. Like, everyone in the world knew that Moicano was maybe a Hail Mary shot to win. So Islam, another easy win. But the fact that those are his title defenses, I think, isn't great. He hasn't even cleared out his division yet, and in fact, I would argue he's leaving his biggest challenges and toughest fights for the competition side of thing on the table. I think his toughest fights in the UFC at this point would be Arman Tazrukian. I know he beat him before, but Tazrukian, that was one, his UFC debut, and two, he came in on short notice. I think the next hardest fight for him would be Ilia Topuria, and Ilia Topuria was the one who was set in line to get the title shot. When he's ducking Topuria, I'll get into why I think it's him ducking. He's a power puncher, could scramble much better probably than Volk even could to keep it on his feet. So I think Topuria would be a very tough matchup. And also you can argue, here's a little bit more about Tazrukian. He's 28, only getting better. Also avoiding another Charles Oliveira rematch. I think he beats Charles, to be fair. Charles 34. The problem with Islam with his wrestling can just control Charles when he's normally calm off his back. I think, to be fair, I think this fight would be exciting, but I think Islam would be a big favorite. Also, Patty. I know, granted, hear me out. I do think Islam beats Patty very easily. Okay, in saying that, this is a big money fight. Patty's a big draw. He's leaving on money on the table, going back to one of those 4 reasons why I believe a lot of fighters fight is competition, legacy, money, fame. You can get a few of those things by beating Patty. He's undefeated in the UFC. Huge name, just beat Michael Chandler. I think that could have been another easy defense, but also boosts his legacy more than beating Jack Della Maddalena does. So I think he's leaving a bunch of his biggest fights on the table, and obviously have Ilia there as well. But I think the biggest thing here is he's leaving his potentially 4 of his biggest fights where they would be his biggest draws, as well as some of his toughest opponents at 155 while moving up. Another thing is Islam's excuse he's been saying to not fight Topuria has been that Topuria has to get a win in the division. If you look back, he actually does have a win at 155. He moved up in weight on short notice and beat Jai Herbert. So if Islam's saying Topuria needs a win at 155, he already has that. And if that's the case, then why doesn't Islam need to win at 170 before fighting for the title? It seems kind of hypocritical to me. Islam's never fought at 170, but somehow Ilya needs to prove himself more than Islam does. That doesn't make much sense. Also, it's different. And you can argue Islam or Ilya's ducking fighters such as, I'll prove them up, Evelev, Diego Lopes, and Gene Silva, I think are the top 3 contenders that Ilia could fight. But the thing is, these fights aren't as big of a money draw as Islam would be. And plus, Ilia already beat the 2 GOATs of the featherweight division before this, beating Volkanovski and Holloway back-to-back fights, both by finish, devastatingly. Evelev's a great fighter, but let's be honest, he's not a draw. Diego Lopes just lost to Volkanovski. I think if he lost to Volkanovski, Topuria probably would have gave him hell. Gene Silva is still young, up and coming. I think that would be a great fight, too, down the road as Ilia versus Silva, but it makes sense why Ilya's moving up. Also, the next thing I want to bring up was the money side of things. Topuria is a huge draw in all of Europe. He's from Georgia, as well as represents Spain. He's undefeated, only 20 years old, massive draw, especially his last 2 cards did numbers when he beat Max Holloway as well as Volkanovski. He's a much bigger name and will bring in much more revenue to the UFC and be a bigger payday for Islam than Jack Della Maddalena would have been. I think Jack has a ton of upside. He's a great fighter. Nothing against Jack. But my argument is Topuria is a bigger money fight. Another thing is UFC doesn't need Islam to move up. They don't. Right now, welterweight is the most healthy it's been in probably a decade. It might even be the healthiest division in the UFC right now. When I say healthiest, I mean has the most credible contenders. Bilal was just champion. He just lost last week to Jack Della Maddalena. So right now we have a new champion. I don't think Bilal deserves a rematch. But if they were to do it, it wouldn't be at the end of the world. Granted, he had no title defenses. I don't think Bilal's next. He shouldn't be next. But he's not even the argument why the division is healthy. We have legitimately 4 potential number 1 contenders at welterweight who could get a title shot before Islam even. Sean Brady, 18-1, just beat Leon Edwards. Only losses to Bilal Muhammad, who was just the champion, coming off 3 straight wins. My opinion, who should be the number 1 contender, is Shavkat Rakhmonov, 30 years old, undefeated at 19-0. Just came off the win over Ian Gary, beat Stephen Thompson, Jeff Neal. I think he should be next. You can make a credible argument for Ian Machado Gary being a number 1 contender. He just beat Carlos Prates. Only loss in the UFC is to Shavkat Rakhmonov, who we just discussed. And then you could also make the argument that Kamaru Usman versus Joaquin Buckley, which is coming up, I believe, the 14th of June. Yeah, June 14th, 2 weeks before the June pay-per-view International Fight Week. You could argue this could potentially be a number 1 contender fight. I don't think it is. I would still put Brady, Shavkat, even Ian Gary potentially over the winner of this fight. But Kamaru Usman's a former champion and always on 3 straight losses, but he was lost to, I think Shavkat's maybe a future champ. I'll just say that. To two former champions. And then he did fight Hamzat close. They also got Joaquin Buckley, who's on a huge fight win streak since losing to Chris Curtis. But since then's rattled off 6 straight wins. Now fighting Kamaru. You can make an argument he can fight for the belt. So Islam does not even need to move up and weight for the UFC. They have 4 potential fighters who could have a legitimate case that you could book in a pay-per-view title fight against Jack Della Maddalena, and I don't think anyone would complain. So all this is doing is holding up another division. It's worse to the UFC because welterweight's already healthy. They're giving up the biggest payday possible with Islam versus Topuria. I would even make the argument that the 0 in Topuria's record is more important than the 0 in Topuria's record, and Islam cleaning out light heavyweight means a lot more to his legacy than beating Jack Della Maddalena, an Aussie who's just won the belt, has no title defenses. Granted, I know Jack has won 17 straight. Great fighter. But I think Islam, before moving up in weight, owes something to Arman Tazrukian. He owes something to Ilia Topuria. Maybe even Paddy. I think he beats Paddy, but let's be honest, it's a big payday. I would make the argument that he hasn't even cleaned out the division. So that's my rant today. I don't know if you can call it ducking, but if you compare it to the 4 things I talked about earlier, competition, I think competition's better for him at lightweight. Legacy, I think it means more to his legacy to beat Topuria than it does to beat Jack and be a double champ, especially when he's not even technically a double champ. Like, he's not defending 155. I know he says he wants to do both and maybe go back down to weight, but he's not technically even a double champ. The money would be better fighting Ilia. Fame would be better fighting against Ilia. I just think that let me know in the comment section. Anyone big Islam fans? I enjoy watching him fight. I think he is right now the pound for pound GOAT. I also think John Jones is up there in the top 5, and I think he's ducking Tom. So let me know. What do you guys think? Is Islam ducking Ilia Topuria? Let me know. Thoughts, comments, feedback. Let me know if I missed anything. I appreciate everyone's support. Let's crush it this weekend. UFC Vegas 106. Talk soon.